We need to have everybody in the game. When my good friend Mr. Bass indicated that 14 months ago, he got off the sidelines. He got into the game. And we are all better off because of it. Now it's time for not just us in this room, but for everybody to get involved. If you want to complain about violence, then you need to be in the game. One of the things I tell people all the time, we're in an election year. I always tell them, look, don't complain if you don't like who gets elected, if you ain't voting. You don't have a right to complain. If you want to complain, if you go out and you vote, now you can complain. One of the things we have to realize with violence, particularly youth violence, which is on the rise, we need to get in the game. It's not too late now. But I tell you, a couple more years, this train's going to be going so fast, we will not be able to stop it. We won't have any idea how to stop it. But now we have the opportunity. And now we also have a document that's been put together as well in place. So hopefully we'll all get on board in regard to that document. And one other thing before I'd be remiss, I was in Hawaii when I was writing on this forward. But I'd be remiss to say if I wrote that whole thing, it was all my idea. I have to recognize my wife, Joy. Who tracked me down and said, look, not only are you going to write it, but here's a start for you. Get on the job. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, 1979 to 1990, Pittsburgh Steeler, Judge of Common Pleas Court, Judge Dwayne Woodruff. A lot of what we speak of today has a spiritual tone to it because it has to. One of the great leaders of Pittsburgh from the religious community is our next presenter. President of PIN, Pittsburgh Interfaith Impact Network, and the former pastor over in the Manchester community. His wife now heads that position. Let's bring him forward, Reverend John Welsh. Reverend John Welsh, also of the Pittsburgh Seminary.
Giving honor to God, it is indeed an honor and a privilege to be here, and I just want to thank my friend and colleague for social justice, Mr. Tim Stevens, and the B-Pep organization for pulling this activity together and all the work that B-Pep has been doing and the work of the Coalition Against Violence. Let me just say this one thing real quickly. I was speaking with a colleague, and a pastor friend of mine, who was in court yesterday with a father who sat and saw his son get sentenced to life in prison because he was convicted of second-degree murder. He was at the scene of the incident. He admits being there. He admits being with the persons who pulled the trigger, denied having shot the person and killed them, but refused to admit who did it. And as a result, he's going to spend the rest of his days and life in prison because he felt it was more important to maintain the bond with his posse than to protect the integrity and well-being of his own family. He has a 5-year-old son who, ever since Daddy was in prison, has been acting out. And when questioned, the young boy says, I want to be with my daddy. This young 5-year-old knows that certain types of behavior will get him where his father is, and he wants to be with his dad. To me, that is serious in nature, and as it has been mentioned earlier today, there are a lot of elements, a lot of factors that contribute to this. I'm here to speak about the role of the faith community, and very quickly, let me share something with you. I'm going to share a scenario of 3 nations. Here's a scenario of the first nation. there are people who own large houses. They're not satisfied with the size of their houses, and so they decide they're going to acquire more property to add to what they have. It doesn't matter how they get it, it's by any means necessary. They want more property. Another characteristic of this nation is that there are those who have and those who have not. Another characteristic of this nation is that there is political corruption, political religious corruption. Another characteristic in this nation is that there is violence in the streets. That's nation number one. Nation number two, there are people who own large houses and are not satisfied with what they have. They just feel that they need to have more and more and more. And so they acquire that property by any means necessary. It doesn't matter who they take it from and how they take it. They want it, it's theirs. In addition to that, there are those who have and those who have not. Thirdly, there is political religious corruption. And fourthly, there is violence in the streets. Now, there's two nations that have very similar characteristics. The third nation, there are people who own large houses. They're not satisfied with what they have, and so they feel they need to expand, and so they want to acquire property by any means necessary. It doesn't matter who they take it from or how they get it. It's theirs, and they want it. In addition, there are those who have and those who have not. Thirdly, there is political religious corruption. And lastly, there is violence in the streets. Nation number one is 8th to 5th century Israel and Judah, BC. Nation number two is 1st century Judea, Palestine. Nation number three is United States of America today. And nation number one, God sent the prophets to speak to these calamities and the atrocities. In nation number two, God came himself. In nation number three, God empowered his people through the church. What is the role of the church? The role of the church, it goes beyond creating programs so that people feel good and Band-Aid cures can be made. The role of the church is to confront injustice. And it's one of the things I like about this document, that in addition to all the things that are outlined with creating coalitions and developing programs, it talks about confronting government. Do you know that there are people who understand and realize the power in the church more than we do? Just look at each May and each November.
That's right.
Where do they show up? In the church. Because they know that they cannot get elected if you don't elect them. They realize that we got power, but we don't realize we got power. And so it's incumbent upon us as people of faith, not just the pastor. The power is not with the pastor. The power is with the pastor and the people in the pews. As a collective, we can change our communities and our society. If Martin King and others, Joe Lowry and other folks who created the Montgomery Improvement Association, decided not to come together and confront the bus segregations, we would still be sitting in the back of the bus today. But they realized that they had power in the pews. And they organized themselves against the Montgomery segregated bus system, and then we had desegregated buses. Rosa Parks didn't just decide to get tired one day and sit in the front. It was a planned effort. She was trained. They calculated when that would happen and how it would happen. And one of the things that I heard from Dr. Otis Moss, not the successor to Jeremiah Wright in Chicago, but the daddy, Otis Moss Jr., he says, when you look at clips, film clips, and you see the marches and you see all of the things that happened during the civil rights movement, those things are good, but what you don't see is what happened in the war rooms, the planning, the learning, the teaching, the struggling with each other. And that's what we have to do as people of faith. We cannot just expect things to fall in our laps. We've got to be willing to work together across denominations. We've got to be willing to work together across faiths. As the president of the Pittsburgh Interfaith Impact Network, we are a coalition of Christians, Muslims, and Jews because we believe that a bullet don't care who you believe in. And the other thing is, as Chief Judge Dwayne Woodruff mentioned, it's a variety of things that have to work together. One of the things we have to understand is that there's a lot that contributes to the violence. From my standpoint, I can go and put programs together, but one thing I need to realize is that I cannot rely on a 501c3 where I'm getting money from the government when I got to confront the government for the things it's doing to create the systems that got us where we are. The other thing is I cannot be content in growing my church if I'm not willing to engage the people in my pews and make them get engaged in community affairs. If you are a church member and you're sitting there and you're not being challenged to act, then you need to find another church. I'm not joking. There are too many people who want to be served, but don't want to serve. And so they can hide in our large sanctuaries because nobody knows their name and nobody's going to ask them to do anything. But we will never resolve the violence issue if we can hide. We've got to come out from behind the bushes, come out from behind the pews, and organize ourselves as people of God and make a difference in our community. Thank you.
We cannot do it without the church. We cannot do it without communities of faith. Reverend John Welsh. My sister in the struggle, Celeste Taylor, the vice chair of the Black Political Empowerment Project, one of the hardest working women in civil rights. Bring her to the stage, a quick overview of some of the other initiatives as we prepare to move toward the end of our program. Celeste Taylor.
Thank you all for being here. Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice and peace requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertions and passionate concerns of dedicated individuals. Dr. King said that, and that's certainly a sentiment I have when thinking about Tim, Valerie, Lois, and all of you. This issue touches all of us, and you can't go anywhere, not even an event like today, and not meet a dear friend who I haven't seen for a long time share with me her own personal loss. But it was great to be able to take her out to the hallway and say, you remember one of the twin Peanuts? My son Forrest was here to serve, because that's his lesson. We can all be great, but we must serve. And sometimes as parents, we need to take our children to the village and create that village. Thank you all for being there for Forrest and for all the other children. B-Pep is special. I'm wearing this shirt, and some folks thought, well, maybe it's for what we're celebrating here today, all the hard work that we've done and will do. But this is a shirt from another place, another city and a state, because so many places are struggling with the same issue of violence. But the Coalition Against Violence teamed up with B-Pep and others. And they knew B-Pep was special because since 1986, we believe that African Americans should vote in each and every election. And thanks to Tim Stevens and the B-Pep ladies and men and all the wonderful people that are part of that organization, we have continued to make sure that voting is an important part of what we do. So we belong to national groups, statewide groups, and local groups. And you received a brochure that outlines many of our projects. And you also have the opportunity to team up with another great community partner, the